The sterile, wood-paneled courtroom was silent, the air thick with unspoken accusations. On one side sat Michael Thompson, a man whose tailored suit and confident smirk screamed power and control. On the other, his wife Samantha, looking small and fragile in a simple grey dress. His lawyer had just spent an hour painting her as a hysterical, vindictive woman. Then Michael took the stand. With a look of practiced pity, he looked at the judge and delivered the final crushing blow. "Your Honor," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "I love my wife, but she is and has been for some time profoundly unstable." A gasp rippled through the gallery, but Samantha's lawyer, Ms. Anya Sharma, simply rose a small, knowing smile on her face. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear as a bell, "I'd now like to play a voicemail from Mr. Thompson, a message he left for my client just 2 months ago." The air in courtroom 4B of the Highcroft County Courthouse was a stagnant, recycled thing, tasting faintly of old paper cheap coffee and the bitter tang of dissolved marriages. It was an atmosphere Samantha Thompson had become intimately familiar with over the past 6 months. Today was supposed to be the crescendo of a long, agonizing symphony of legal maneuvering and emotional warfare. Today, her husband Michael was on the stand. He looked every bit the master of his universe, even here. His dark, expensive suit was tailored to perfection, not a single thread out of place. His salt and pepper hair was impeccably styled, and his jaw was set with a confidence that seemed carved from granite. When he spoke, his voice was a deep, resonant baritone, the kind that commanded attention in boardrooms and swayed investors. It was the same voice that had once whispered promises of a shared forever in her ear. Now, it was a weapon turned against her. Samantha sat beside her lawyer, Anya Sharma. Anya was a stark contrast to Michael's bulldog of a counsel, a 60-something legal titan named Arthur Davenport. Where Davenport was bluster and theatrical indignation, Anya was a study in quiet intensity. Her dark eyes missed nothing, and she had a habit of tilting her head slightly when listening, as if physically weighing the words being spoken. Samantha had felt a flicker of hope when she'd first hired her, a hope that had been steadily eroded by the relentless onslaught from Michael's side. "Mr. Thompson," Arthur Davenport began, his voice oozing with a paternalistic concern that made Samantha's stomach clench. "Could you please describe for the court the nature of your wife's behavior in the months leading up to your separation?" Michael sighed, a performance of profound sadness. He glanced at Samantha. His blue eyes, once the color of a summer sky, now chips of ice, feigning a deep, pained reluctance. "It's difficult to talk about Arthur," he said, his voice catching just so. "I loved her. I still love her. But she began to change." Samantha stared down at her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. Change. That was his word for it. Not awaken, not escape. Change, as if she were a faulty appliance. Change in what way? Michael Davenport prompted gently. "She became volatile," Michael said, letting the word hang in the silent courtroom. "Erratic. There were fits of rage over the smallest things, a misplaced set of keys, a comment I'd make about the news. Then, just as suddenly, she would descend into these deep depressive states where she wouldn't leave her room for days. It was a masterful performance, a tapestry woven from half-truths and outright fabrications. Yes, she'd been angry. The anger had been a slow-burning fire that had finally found oxygen. The misplaced keys had been her car keys, which he'd hidden to prevent her from meeting her sister Jessica for lunch after he'd decided Jessica was a negative influence. The depressive states were the bone-deep exhaustion that came from living on a knife's edge, constantly second-guessing her own reality. "Did you try to get her help?" Davenport asked, his tone dripping with sympathy for the long-suffering husband. "Of course," Michael said, shaking his head sadly. "I begged her to see a therapist, a psychiatrist. I found the best doctors in the city. Dr. Alistair Finch, a wonderful man. I made the appointments, but she refused. She became paranoid. She started accusing me of the most bizarre things." "What sort of things, Michael?" Michael took a deep breath and looked directly at the judge, a man in his late 60s named Judge Harrison, whose impassive face gave nothing away. "She accused me of trying to control her, of spying on her. She claimed I was trying to turn her friends and family against her. She built this entire narrative, this fantasy world, where I was some kind of villain, a monster." Samantha felt a hot tear escape her eye and trace a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. Let them see. Let them see what he was doing. He was taking her truth, her lived experience of suffocation and psychological torment, and twisting it into a symptom of madness. This was his true talent. Not building a financial empire, but bending reality to his will. And this behavior, it escalated. Davenport continued guiding his witness like a conductor. Dramatically, Michael confirmed. "It became impossible to live with. For me and for our son, Daniel. He was terrified of her moods. I was worried for her safety, for his. The final straw. She vanished one night. No note, nothing. I was frantic. I called the police. She turned up 2 days later at her sister's house, making these wild accusations. That's when I knew I had to file for divorce, to protect our son, to protect myself." He painted a picture of a man pushed to the brink, a loving husband forced to take drastic measures in the face of his wife's deteriorating mental health. It was a compelling story. Samantha watched as two of the jurors, both women, exchanged sympathetic glances. They were buying it. Of course they were. The world was built to believe men like Michael Thompson, men who exuded wealth, power, and a calm rationality that was in itself a form of aggression. Davenport's voice softened further. "Michael, I know this is incredibly painful, but I have to ask, in your honest opinion, based on your years of marriage and your intimate knowledge of your wife, do you believe her to be at this present time of a stable mind?" The courtroom held its breath. Anya's hand rested lightly on Samantha's forearm, a small, grounding pressure. Samantha looked up, her gaze locking with Michael's across the polished wood and hushed air. She saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not regret, but triumph. He had her exactly where he wanted her. He held her gaze for a long moment before turning to Judge Harrison. His face was a mask of solemn sorrow. "Your Honor," Michael said, his voice a low, somber declaration that echoed in the silent room. "I love my wife, but she is and has been for some time profoundly unstable." A low murmur swept through the public gallery. Arthur Davenport gave a slight satisfied nod and turned toward his table. "No further questions, Your Honor." Judge Harrison looked at Anya. "Ms. Sharma, your witness." Samantha's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the moment she had been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. Anya gave her arm a reassuring squeeze before rising to her feet. She was not a tall woman, but she stood with an unshakable poise that commanded the space around her. She approached the witness stand, not with the predatory circling of Davenport, but with a quiet, deliberate calm. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice pleasant, almost conversational. "You've painted a very distressing picture of your wife, a woman unraveling. "It's the truth," Michael said, his composure unwavering. "The truth," Anya repeated softly. "Let's talk about the truth." Samantha watched, her breath caught in her throat. The cage door was locked, the key seemingly thrown away. Michael had built the walls, gilded them with his charm and wealth, and now he was trying to convince the world that she was the one who had lost her mind inside it. She could only pray that Anya had found a way to show them the bars. The early years of their marriage had been a whirlwind of champagne flutes and gallery openings, of weekend trips to the Hamptons and ski vacations in Aspen. Michael Thompson wasn't just wealthy, he was from a family whose name was etched onto university buildings and museum wings. He had swept Samantha off her feet when she was just a 24-year-old art history graduate working at a small Chelsea gallery. He was handsome, worldly, and utterly intoxicating. He'd made her feel like the only woman in a world he owned. Their wedding was a lavish affair at the family's sprawling estate in Connecticut, an event chronicled in the society pages. Samantha, an intelligent and vibrant woman from a comfortable but by no means wealthy middle-class family, found herself thrust into a world of unimaginable privilege. In this world, friends had last names like Vanderbilt and Astor, not the real ones perhaps, but distant moneyed cousins who carried the same aura. Their conversations were about acquisitions of art, of property, of smaller companies. Initially, Michael's attention felt like a warm, protective embrace. He loved to show her off, as he put it. He would buy her exquisite dresses, always in the classic, understated style he preferred. "You're a Thompson now, darling," he'd say, his hand possessively on the small of her back. "We have an image to maintain." She would laugh, flattered. The first whispers of control were so faint she mistook them for care. He'd suggest she quit her job at the gallery. "Why would my wife need to work?" he'd asked, framing it as a gift of leisure. "I want you to be free to pursue your passions. Charity work, maybe, redecorate the house." She had hesitated, loving the intellectual stimulation of her job, but the allure of a life without financial constraints, coupled with his persuasive charm, won out. She quit. Then came the subtle comments about her friends. Her best friend from college, Jessica Riley, was a fiery, independent journalist who never minced words. After a dinner where Jessica had playfully debated politics with Michael, he had remarked on the drive home, "Jessica's a bit aggressive, don't you think? That kind of energy can be draining." It was said casually, but the implication was clear. Slowly, he planted seeds of doubt. Jessica was too loud. Another friend was too frivolous. A third was clearly envious of their life. He never forbade her from seeing them, which would have been too obvious. Instead, he would schedule a last-minute weekend trip or an important dinner party on the same night she had planned, sighing with disappointment that she couldn't join him. "It's just this once, darling. This is crucial for the merger." It was always just this once. Over time, the logistics of maintaining her old friendships became exhausting, and her social circle slowly morphed into his. Their son, Daniel, was born 3 years into the marriage. Samantha poured all of her love and energy into him. For a while, it was enough. Daniel was her world. But as he grew, Michael's control began to extend to her parenting. He hired a nanny, a stern older woman named Mrs. Gable, who reported directly to him. Samantha's decisions were often subtly undermined. If she wanted to let Daniel play in the mud, Michael would appear smiling and say, Now, Samantha. Let's not be careless." He could catch a chill. Mrs. Gable, perhaps some educational blocks inside. He framed his interference as concern for their son's well-being and development, casting her as the overly emotional, slightly reckless mother, and himself as the steady, rational father. The gilded cage began to feel less like a palace and more like a prison. The loneliness was a physical ache. She was surrounded by people at glittering parties, but had no one to talk to. Her conversations were scripted, her opinions sanded down to be inoffensive and agreeable. The woman who had once passionately debated art and politics was now an expert in pleasantries and vapid small talk. The incident with her sister Jessica was a turning point. Jessica had called frantic. Their mother had been in a car accident and was in the hospital. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious. Samantha had immediately packed a bag, ready to drive the 3 hours to her hometown. "I've already spoken to the doctor, darling," Michael had said, walking into their bedroom, his phone in his hand. He was preternaturally calm. "She's stable. A broken leg and some bruises. There's no need for you to rush off in a panic." "Michael, it's my mother. I need to be there," Samantha insisted, her heart pounding with worry. "And you will be," he said smoothly. "I'll have the driver take you in the morning." "It's late. You're emotional. It's not safe for you to drive in this state." "What state? I'm perfectly calm. I want to go now." His eyes hardened. The charming facade dropped for just a second, revealing the cold steel beneath. "You are not driving anywhere tonight, Samantha. You are overwrought. We will discuss it in the morning." He walked over to her purse, opened it, and took out her car keys. "Just so you don't do anything foolish." He then turned and left the room, closing the door softly behind him. She stood there, stunned into silence. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't thrown a single thing. But the violation, the absolute certainty of his control, was more terrifying than any physical threat. He had spoken to her as if she were a hysterical child, incapable of making a rational decision. She had called Jessica back sobbing with a mixture of fear and impotent rage, trying to explain why she couldn't leave. Jessica had been furious. "Sam, can't you see what he's doing? This isn't normal. You need to get out of there." That night, lying alone in their king-sized bed, the truth settled over her. This wasn't care. It was ownership. She wasn't his partner. She was his most prized possession, to be polished, displayed, and locked away for safekeeping. The anger she felt after that night was a revelation. It was a clean, sharp-edged thing that cut through the fog of confusion and self-doubt he had so carefully cultivated. She started to notice everything. The way he would subtly correct her in front of others, always with a smile. The way he'd check her phone, disguised as a casual, "Who was that, darling?" The way he managed their finances so completely that she had to ask for money for everyday expenses, a deliberate humiliation designed to remind her of her dependence. She began to fight back in small, secret ways. She opened a separate email account. She started reconnecting with Jessica and her other friends online, sharing small, coded details of her life. She started keeping a private journal, documenting every slight, every manipulation, every time he tried to make her question her own sanity. This practice of writing things down became her anchor to reality. When he would later deny an event had happened or twist its details, she could go back to her journal and confirm she wasn't crazy. He had said that. He had done that. Her rebellion did not go unnoticed. Michael, a master of observing shifts in power, sensed her pulling away. His control tightened. He became more critical, more dismissive. He would forget to pass on messages from her family. He cancelled her credit card once, claiming it was a mistake by the bank, forcing her to endure the embarrassment of having it declined at a store. Each act was a small turn of the screw designed to break her spirit and force her back into submission. He was gaslighting her, and now that she had a name for it, she saw it everywhere. He'd move her things, and then help her look for them, tut-tutting about her forgetfulness. He'd deny promises he'd made, looking at her with such sincere confusion that she would almost believe his version of events. She knew she had to leave, but the thought was terrifying. He had all the money, all the power. He had spent years curating her image as a fragile, slightly flighty socialite. He would use their son Daniel against her. He would paint her as an unfit mother. He would, she knew, with chilling certainty, try to convince everyone, including herself, that she was unstable. He was already laying the groundwork, telling friends, and even their couple's therapist, a man he had chosen, about his concerns for her mental well-being. The whispers and lies had been his primary weapons for years. Now, in the stark reality of the courtroom, he was speaking them out loud, broadcasting them as fact. Samantha listened to his testimony, a coldness knot of dread in her stomach. He was good. He was so good. He was building her gilded cage all over again, right here in front of the judge and jury, and she was terrified that this time there would be no escape at all. The year before Samantha finally left was a year of escalating tension, a cold war fought within the silent, opulent rooms of their Manhattan townhouse. The air itself seemed to crackle with unsaid things. Michael felt her slipping from his grasp, and like a desperate king, he tightened his grip, not realizing he was crushing the very thing he sought to control. The incident that galvanized Samantha's resolve from a desperate wish into a concrete plan involved her art. For years, she had quietly been painting in a small, sunlit room on the third floor that she had claimed as her studio. It was the one place that was truly hers. Her work was abstract, full of the turbulent emotion she couldn't otherwise express. Through Jessica, who had a friend in the art world, Samantha was offered a remarkable opportunity, a chance to be included in a group exhibition, a showcase for emerging female artists at a small but respected gallery in Soho. She was ecstatic. It was more than a hobby. It was a validation of a part of herself she thought Michael had extinguished. She worked feverishly for weeks, pouring her heart, her rage, and her hope onto the canvases. She decided to keep it from Michael until the acceptance was confirmed, knowing he would find a way to dismiss or sabotage it. The gallery director, a woman named Ms. Dubois, was scheduled to visit her studio to make the final selections. The appointment was for a Tuesday at 2 p.m. Samantha was a bundle of nerves and excitement. This was her lifeline. On that Tuesday morning, Michael announced he was working from home. This was unusual. He thrived on the energy of his downtown office. He seemed to be in a strangely solicitous mood. He brought her coffee, asked about her day, and complimented her dress. It immediately put her on high alert. His charm was often a prelude to an attack. At 1:30 p.m., as she was doing a final tidying of her studio, Michael appeared at the door. He was holding 2 glasses and a bottle of expensive champagne. "A little celebration, my love," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. A celebration for what Samantha asked, her heart beginning to pound. "For us," he said, popping the cork. "For getting through a rough patch. I feel like we're finally turning a corner." He handed her a glass. "To a new beginning." She didn't want to drink, her mind focused on Ms. Dubois's imminent arrival. But refusing would provoke a scene. She took a small, hesitant sip. He refilled her glass as soon as she lowered it. He talked about a vacation he wanted to take them on to Italy, just the 2 of them. He was laying the charm on thick, a suffocating blanket of it. At 1:55 p.m., the doorbell rang. Samantha's stomach leaped. "That's for me," she said, setting her half-full glass down and moving to the door. Michael stepped in her way. "Who are you expecting? A friend?" She lied, not wanting to get into it with him now. "Nonsense," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Let the staff get it. You and I are having a moment." He took her by the arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Tell me more about this gallery idea of yours." Panic flared in her chest. "How did you, Samantha? I know everything that happens in this house," he said, his voice low and cold. The mask was gone. "You really think you could orchestrate a little secret art show behind my back?" The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. "Michael, please? This is important to me," she begged, trying to pull her arm free. "Your importance lies here, with me. With our family," he hissed. He then raised his voice to a pleasant conversational tone. "You know, I had a chat with your Miss Dubois this morning. A very pleasant woman." Samantha froze. The blood drained from her face. "What did you do?" "I simply expressed my concern," he said smoothly, taking a sip of champagne. "I told her that you were a wonderful woman, a brilliant hobbyist, but that you are under immense personal strain at the moment, that you suffer from bouts of, let's call it, artistic temperament, that you sometimes get grandiose ideas that you aren't emotionally equipped to handle. I suggested that the pressure of a public exhibition might be detrimental to your recovery." The doorbell went silent. Through the window, Samantha saw the figure of Ms. Dubois walking away from their front steps. He had done it. He had cut her lifeline. She stared at him speechless. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He hadn't just sabotaged her. He had done it using the very language of concern he always employed, painting her as unstable and himself as the caring, protective husband. Why, she finally whispered the word, barely audible. "Because you are my wife," he said, setting his glass down with a decisive click. "Your focus should be here. This house. Our son. Me. Not some silly self-indulgent fantasy that puts our family's reputation at risk. What if the critics hated it? It would be a humiliation." That was the moment the storm broke inside her. The quiet rebellion was over. It was time for war. She didn't scream or cry. A terrifying calm settled over her. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw not a man, but a monster, cloaked in a bespoke suit. "I will leave you," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. He laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. "Don't be ridiculous, Samantha. You have nothing. You are nothing without me. Where would you go? Who would believe a single word you say?" From that day on, she began to plan her escape with the precision of a military strategist. She confided fully in Jessica, who helped her secure a lawyer, Anya Sharma, a woman known for handling difficult divorces involving powerful men. Samantha started meticulously documenting everything moving beyond her journal. She used a secret app on her phone to record conversations. She photographed documents. She forwarded incriminating emails from Michael to her secret email account. She was gathering ammunition. She played the part of the dutiful, subdued wife. She let him believe he had won, that he had broken her. This apparent submission made him careless. His arrogance became his Achilles heel. The night she finally left Daniel was at a sleepover at a friend's house. It was a Friday. Michael was out at a boys' night, a steak dinner, with his equally powerful friends. Samantha had packed 2 bags, one for her, one for Daniel, and hidden them in the trunk of her car, the spare key to which she had secretly had made months ago. She wrote him a short, simple note, leaving it on his pillow. "I have taken Daniel. We are safe. My lawyer will be in touch." She knew claiming to have Daniel even though he was safely at his friend's, would provoke a raw, unfiltered reaction. She drove to Jessica's apartment, her hands shaking on the steering wheel, half expecting him to materialize in the rearview mirror. As soon as she was inside Jessica's apartment, her phone rang. It was Michael. She ignored it. It rang again and again. Then, the notification pinged. Voicemail. Her first instinct was to delete it without listening. Jessica stopped her. No, save it, save everything. You need to listen with a clear head. This is evidence, Sam. A few hours later, after a calming cup of tea, and with Jessica by her side, Samantha took a deep breath and played the message. The voice that filled the room was not the calm, controlled baritone of the public Michael Thompson. It was the raw, snarling rage of the man behind the mask. It was slurred with expensive whiskey and incandescent with fury. It was rambling, pathetic, and utterly damning. She listened to the entire 3-minute message, her face pale. When it was over, she looked at Jessica, a single tear, tracing the same path down her cheek as it would months later. In the courtroom, he said no one would believe me, Samantha whispered. Jessica squeezed her hand. He just made sure they will. She saved the voicemail to her laptop, to a hard drive, and to a cloud server. It was the most important piece of ammunition she had. It was the sound of the gathering storm finally breaking, and Samantha knew it held the power to either destroy her completely or finally set her free. Back in the frigid quiet of courtroom 4B, Anya Sharma approached the witness stand. The air was thick with the residue of Michael's testimony. He sat there, a bastion of aggrieved composure, having successfully painted himself as the victim. Mr. Thompson, Anya, began, her voice calm and even. You've testified that your wife became paranoid, that she accused you of trying to control her and turn people against her. That's correct, Michael affirmed, looking at Anya as if she were a mildly interesting but ultimately harmless insect. They were delusions. It was heartbreaking to witness. Heartbreaking, Anya repeated, letting the word hang. Let's discuss the incident with her mother's car accident. Samantha, your wife, testified that she wanted to drive to see her mother that night, but you prevented her from leaving. Is that true? Michael sighed, the picture of patience. I didn't prevent her. I advised her against it. She was hysterical, in no state to drive. I was concerned for her safety. I arranged for a driver to take her first thing in the morning. So, you took her car keys. I may have temporarily held on to them. Yes, to prevent her from doing something rash. It was an act of care, Ms. Sharma. An act of care, Anya echoed again, making a small note on her legal pad. And what about the art exhibition, the one proposed by Ms. Dubois from the Soho Gallery? A flicker of annoyance crossed Michael's face, so quick that if you weren't looking for it, you'd miss it. Ah, yes. Her painting. A lovely hobby. Miss Dubois was scheduled to visit your home to view Samantha's work for possible inclusion in a show, but she never came in. Why is that, Mr. Thompson? As I recall, my wife got cold feet. She became very agitated that day and cancelled the appointment herself, he said, the lie slipping out as smoothly as silk. She was often overwhelmed by such things. So you did not call Ms. Dubois yourself that morning? Anya asked, her eyes boring into him. You didn't tell her that your wife was emotionally fragile, suffering from grandiose ideas, and that the pressure of an exhibition might be detrimental to her recovery? The courtroom was utterly silent. Anya was quoting his own words back to him, the words he had spoken to Ms. Dubois and later to Samantha herself. Michael's composure finally cracked just a little. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Arthur Davenport, sensing danger, shifted in his seat, ready to object. That's That's an absurd accusation, Michael stammered, his voice losing its polished baritone. I would never do such a thing. That is a complete fabrication. More of my wife's instability. So to be clear, Anya pressed on, her voice like steel. Your testimony is that you have always acted out of love and concern for your wife, that you encouraged her independence, that you never tried to control her, isolate her, or sabotage her opportunities, and that her belief that you did these things is a product of her paranoid, unstable mind. Yes, Michael said, his confidence returning as he fell back on his central theme. That is the tragic truth of the matter. The tragic truth, Anya said, turning from the witness stand and walking slowly back toward her table. Samantha held her breath, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. This was the precipice. Anya reached her table and picked up a small, slim, digital audio recorder. She turned back to face the judge. Your Honor, she said, her voice ringing with newfound force. Mr. Thompson has painted a very specific picture of himself and my client. He claims he is a caring husband and she is a delusional woman. But men like Mr. Thompson operate on two levels. There is the public face, the one of care and concern. And then there is the private reality. I believe the court deserves to see that private reality. Arthur Davenport shot to his feet. Objection. Your Honor, counsel is grandstanding. What is this? Some kind of theatrical stunt? Judge Harrison looked at Anya, his expression stern. Ms. Sharma, get to the point. Do you have evidence to present? I do, Your Honor, Anya said, holding up the recorder. On the night my client left the marital home, March 22nd of this year, Mr. Thompson left her a voicemail. A message he left when he believed no one else would ever hear it. A message that speaks directly to his state of mind, his motives, and his treatment of his wife. Michael went pale, not just a little pale, but a ghastly, bloodless white. He stared at the small silver recorder in Anya's hand as if it were a venomous snake. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Objection. Davenport boomed, his face turning red. Improper foundation. We have no idea if this recording is authentic. It could be doctored. It's a transparent attempt to ambush the witness and prejudice the court. The recording has been authenticated by an independent forensic audio expert. Your Honor, Anya countered smoothly. The report was submitted to the court and opposing counsel last week. It is the unedited, untampered with voice of Mr. Michael Thompson left on my client's phone at 11:47 p.m. on the night in question. Judge Harrison peered down from his bench, his eyes narrowing on the suddenly sweating Michael Thompson. The jury was leaning forward, their eyes wide with anticipation. The carefully constructed facade of the hearing had just been shattered. I will allow it, Judge Harrison said, his voice a low gravel. The objection is overruled. Proceed, Ms. Sharma. Davenport slumped back into his chair, looking utterly defeated. He shot a furious glare at Michael, who seemed to be shrinking in the witness chair. Anya walked to the court clerk, handed over the recorder, and gave instructions for it to be played over the courtroom's speaker system. The clerk, a young woman with wide, curious eyes, fumbled with the connections for a moment. The silence in the room was absolute, a palpable, heavy thing. Samantha felt as if her own heart had stopped. She looked at Michael. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. In his, she no longer saw triumph or pity. She saw pure, undiluted panic. The clerk nodded to Anya. Anya nodded to the judge. A faint click echoed through the speakers, followed by the soft hiss of a phone line, and then a voice filled the courtroom. It was Michael's voice, but it was a version no one in that room, save for Samantha, had ever heard before. It was thick slurred and laced with a terrifying, raw venom. "You think you can just walk away?" The voice snarled, the sound of ice clinking in a glass audible in the background. The first words of his confession had begun. The voice that echoed through the courtroom speakers was a grotesque caricature of the calm, articulate man in the witness box. It was the real Michael Thompson, stripped of his bespoke suit and his carefully curated charm, left with nothing but his raw, whiskey-soaked ego. "You think you can just walk away?" The recorded voice slurred a snarling, guttural sound that made several jurors physically flinch. "You think you can just take my son and disappear? Who do you think you are, Samantha?" The recorded, Michael laughed a wet, ugly sound. "You have nothing. You are nothing. I made you. I took you from that pathetic little gallery, from your pathetic little life, and I gave you the world. And this is how you repay me. By trying to sneak away in the middle of the night, like a common thief, on the stand." The real time, Michael Thompson stared straight ahead, his face a mask of waxy horror. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the witness box. He looked like a man watching his own execution. The voicemail continued, a rambling, venomous torrent. "You're going to call your lawyer, your little pit bull lawyer. What are you going to tell her, huh? That I was mean to you, that I didn't want you showing off your sad little paintings to a bunch of pretentious snobs. I saved you from humiliation, you ungrateful bitch. I protected you." The word bitch hung in the air, a shocking violation of the courtroom's decorum. Arthur Davenport had his head in his hands. Samantha closed her eyes, not out of shame, but to focus on the sound. It was painful to hear, but it was also the sound of her vindication. Every word was a brick being removed from the wall of her prison. "And your friends," the voice on the recording, spat the name, dripping with contempt. "Jessica. You think she's your friend? I know you've been talking to her, whispering your little poisons. I should have cut her out completely years ago. I tried to warn you, she was no good for you. They were all dragging you down, filling your head with stupid, independent woman nonsense. You're not independent, Samantha. You're my wife." Anya Sharma stood perfectly still, her gaze fixed on the jury. She was letting Michael's own words do the work for her. She could see the dawning comprehension on their faces, the disgust, the pity not for Michael, but for Samantha. They were finally seeing the monster. And this instability crap, the recorded voice raged on, the slurring getting worse. "You think that's an act? I fucking made you unstable. You think you're crazy. Of course you're crazy. I've spent the last 5 years making you crazy. It was a masterpiece, moving your keys, denying things I said, telling everyone you were fragile. It was so easy. You were so desperate to be loved, you believed everything. You believed me. You thought you were losing your mind. And I was the only one who could hold you together." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. It was a confession. A drunken, furious, but undeniable confession of methodical, long-term psychological abuse. Gaslighting laid bare in the perpetrator's own proud, slurring words. "I owned you," the voice continued, dropping to a menacing, conspiratorial whisper that was somehow more chilling than the rage. "I owned your confidence. I owned your reality. And you were happy. Don't you deny it. You were happy in the beautiful life I built for you. All you had to do was be quiet and beautiful and do as you were told. But you couldn't even do that. You had to have your own thoughts." The recording captured the sound of a glass slamming down on a hard surface, making the clerk jump. "So you go ahead. The voice snarled, its bravado sounding pathetic now. You run to your lawyer. You cry to the judge. You tell them I'm a monster. And who are they going to believe? Me, Michael Thompson, the man who has everything. Or you, the hysterical, paranoid, unstable little wife who ran away. I've been setting this stage for years, you stupid woman. Checkmate. There was a moment of heavy drunken breathing and then a final chilling statement. You will come crawling back. They always do. And when you do, I'm putting you in a hospital. A nice, quiet place where you can't hurt yourself or my reputation. It's for your own good, you see. I've always done what's best for you. The voicemail ended. A final, abrupt click, plunging the courtroom back into a silence that was heavier and more profound than before. For a long moment, no one moved. The 12 members of the jury stared at Michael Thompson, their expressions ranging from cold fury to utter revulsion. Judge Harrison peered down from his bench, his face a thundercloud of judicial wrath. Arthur Davenport looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. And Michael had finally broken. The mask of composure was shattered into a million pieces. His face was slick with sweat, his mouth hung open, and a low, animalistic sound of despair escaped his throat. He looked at Samantha, his eyes wide with a desperate, pleading terror. It was the look of a king whose castle had just crumbled into dust around him. Samantha met his gaze. She felt no triumph, no desire for revenge. Just a deep, aching sadness for the woman she had been, and a profound, quiet relief for the woman she was about to become. The validation wasn't loud or explosive. It was a silent, internal click, the sound of the cage door finally swinging open. Anya Sharma let the silence stretch for a full 30 seconds, allowing the horror of the confession to fully permeate the room. Then she turned to the witness stand, her voice soft, yet carrying to every corner of the courtroom. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "do you have anything to add to your testimony?" Michael Thompson stared at her, his lips trembling, his carefully constructed world in ruins. He simply shook his head, a broken man, finally speechless. "No further questions, Your Honor," Anya said, and walked back to her table, where she placed a comforting hand on Samantha's shoulder. The silence that followed Anya's final words was a living entity. It pressed in on them thick and suffocating. Judge Harrison, his face like a stone carving of disapproval, finally broke it. He cleared his throat, a sound like gravel turning over, and it seemed to startle everyone back into motion. "This court," he announced, his voice low and dangerous, "will take a 1-hour recess." He banged his gavel, a sharp, punitive crack that echoed the shattering of Michael's credibility, and Mr. Davenport, the judge, added, his eyes locking onto the deflated lawyer, "I suggest you use the time to have a substantive conversation with your client." Without another glance at Michael Judge, Harrison rose and swept from the room. The moment he was gone, the courtroom erupted into a low, buzzing hive of whispers. The jurors filed out their faces, a mixture of shock and disgust, pointedly avoiding even a sideways glance at the witness stand. Michael remained frozen in the chair, a statue of a broken man. His carefully constructed world hadn't just been exposed, it had been detonated. Arthur Davenport rushed to his side, his face pale, his hands flapping uselessly. He leaned in close, whispering furiously, but Michael seemed unresponsive, his eyes fixed on the empty jury box, as if he could still see their condemning faces. Anya placed a firm hand on Samantha's back. "Let's go. We need some air." She guided Samantha, who felt strangely lightheaded, through the side door reserved for counsel. The walk down the quiet, marble-floored hallway felt surreal. Each step was an echo in a world that had fundamentally shifted on its axis. The weight that she had carried for years, the heavy cloak of his lies and her self-doubt, had been lifted so suddenly she felt she might float away. They entered a small, sterile conference room. Her sister Jessica was already there, pacing like a caged animal. The moment she saw them, she rushed forward, enveloping Samantha in a fierce hug. "Oh my God, Sam!" Jessica breathed into her hair. "I was listening from the gallery. I can't believe it." He said it. He admitted all of it. Samantha leaned into her sister's embrace, the strength of it grounding her. "He did." She whispered the words, feeling foreign in her own mouth. Anya closed the door, giving them a moment. "He imploded," she said, her professional calm finally giving way to a small, grim smile. "In 13 years of practicing family law, I have never witnessed such a complete and utter self-destruction on the stand. He handed us everything." Samantha sank into a chair, the adrenaline that had been holding her together beginning to seep away, leaving a profound exhaustion in its wake. She didn't feel the rush of victory she might have expected. There was no joy, only a hollow, aching sense of waste. The waste of years of love, of trust. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Now," Anya said, pulling a chair up, "we hold all the cards. His credibility is shot. His character is, well, it's on that recording for everyone to hear. There is no way Judge Harrison grants him any kind of favorable custody arrangement. Davenport knows it. This case, for all intents and purposes, is over." As if on cue, there was a soft knock on the door. Anya opened it to reveal Arthur Davenport. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. The expensive suit was rumpled, the arrogant bluster completely gone, replaced by the weary, hangdog expression of a man facing an unwinnable war. "Ms. Sharma," he began, his voice raspy. "May I have a word?" He glanced at Samantha and Jessica, his eyes holding a flicker of what looked almost like fear. "We're a little busy, Arthur," Anya said coolly. "Please," he said, the word stripped of all its usual power. It was a plea. "My client, he's ready to discuss a settlement, a comprehensive one." Anya looked at Samantha, who gave a slow, deliberate nod. This was it, the final reversal of power. The man who had once dictated every aspect of her life was now sending his lawyer to beg for terms. Davenport laid out the offer. It was a complete capitulation. Full physical custody of Daniel to Samantha, with supervised visitation for Michael, contingent on him completing a court-mandated anger management and psychological program. A financial settlement so generous it was clearly meant as hush money, offering her the townhouse, a lump sum that would ensure she and Daniel were secure for life and covering all her legal fees. Everything she had asked for and more. He wanted to avoid the continuation of the hearing at all costs. He wanted to stop the bleeding. When he was done, the room was silent. Jessica looked at Samantha, her eyes wide with triumphant vindication. Samantha took a deep breath, the sterile conference room air feeling like the first clean breath she'd taken in a decade. She thought of the woman who had trembled while secretly recording conversations, the woman who had cried in her sister's apartment listening to that voicemail, the woman who had sat in that courtroom feeling invisible. And she thought of the man on the stand, the man who had called her unstable, who had proudly confessed to making her that way. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and steady. There was no anger in it, no thirst for revenge, only a quiet, unshakable finality. "The financial terms are acceptable," she said, looking directly at Davenport, "but I want one more thing. I want it in the settlement signed by him. A formal written apology, not a legal statement of regret. An apology. To me. In it, he will state that his allegations of my instability were untrue and that he knowingly engaged in a campaign of psychological manipulation. That document won't be for the court or the public. It will be for me. And for my son, for when he is old enough to ask questions. Davenport looked stunned. This wasn't about money. It was about truth. It was, Samantha realized, the only thing it had ever really been about. Anya Sharma smiled. "You have our terms, Arthur." Davenport nodded, defeated. "I'll convey them to my client." He turned and left, closing the door behind him, leaving the three women in the quiet room on the other side of the storm. The raw, unvarnished truth of that voicemail changed everything. It wasn't just evidence. It was a confession, a guided tour into the twisted mind of a manipulator. Samantha Thompson walked out of that courtroom not as the unstable wife her husband had tried to portray, but as a survivor, her quiet dignity and strength finally visible to the world. Her story is a chilling reminder that the most dangerous cages aren't made of iron bars, but of whispers, lies, and the slow, methodical erosion of a person's reality. It's a testament to the incredible courage it takes to fight back, to gather your truth, and to find your voice, even when a powerful man has done everything he can to silence it. What did you think of Samantha's story? Have you ever witnessed the chilling power of gaslighting? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that expose the truths hidden behind closed doors.